Phil Coley from iPlus Group. We are an outsourced sales, marketing and media company. So for me, sales, I've been in sales for 30 something years now, from selling advertising on the phone when I left school, through to selling big software solutions, multi-million-pound solutions. So for me, B2B sales is very much where I sit. I can obviously talk about B2C as well, but for me, it's about B2B sales really is my background, but also just another side to me as well. I was in business for sort of 3 years after leaving school, selling advertising, then went and did my passion. So went and did a sports psychology degree because I played sport to a fairly high level, and then practiced as a sports psychologist alongside a daytime job as well for a number of years. So for me, my fascination is people and my fascination is sales. And I'm always a big advocate about sales. Sales is a skill that people seem to forget, but every business needs. People go and get degrees in X, Y, and Z, but also sales is for me really is the lifeblood of a business. Sometimes people just don't like the word sales, but you can't run a business without sales. So I'll be this is what sales is. So when I get into the presentation in a moment, the one key thing about sales is you do need sales. It is a lifeblood of any business. And it's just about sales over thousands of years hasn't really changed. It's still a commodity where somebody wants something or somebody needs something to solve a solution. Those are probably two of the key things. So if you go back to traders back 2,000 years ago, people were still selling and they were still trading. And the principles behind that haven't hugely changed. The vehicles about letting people know about your business have massively changed, but the principles haven't. So what I want to do in this particular one is I just want to look at a sales pipeline and describe what it is. So we're going to look at the sales pipeline to go through there. And if we go to the next slide, what is a pipeline? So in terms of a pipeline in sales, a pipeline is a flow of leads, inquiries, sales. And if you look there, you've got a tap with a drip or you've got a tap with a flow. And so the most important thing about a pipeline is that the tap is always flowing, or when you turn it on, it's always flowing. And a lot of companies, and regardless of size, to be fair, a lot of companies, when they are maybe a sole trader, you can be really busy on a project and suddenly a project comes to an end and you're like, where's my next sale? And that's really means you haven't got a very strong pipeline. And also it's when you're doing really well, you sort of go, everything's fine, and you're not even looking at new areas for development. So a pipeline really is, as it says, it's just a flow of leads, inquiries, or sales. And it's really key that you have that. So let's have a look now at sources. So a pipeline, as I said, is about that flow of inquiries, leads, and sales. The one that I always look at to start with is I try to use the tap analogy and use water as the analogy. So if you think about water coming out of your tap, it's got to start somewhere. So we talk about water, the source, so the rain falling from the skies and then going into the ground, and then there's a lovely spring. So the source is where we're looking at. So a source here, I'm looking at 4 sort of key areas, but I'll go into them in a little bit more detail. So you can look at an inbound lead or an inquiry. You can also then look at that from a digital perspective. So if you're using, say, a Google search, or you're paying for pay-per-click, so PPC or SEO, your digital marketing will also be a source of leads. Outbound, an area really close to my heart, an outbound lead could be from telemarketing, would be one of those areas. But also outbound can be from networking. So all of us sat on this call take part in a number of Jonathan's networking groups, and that's putting us out there to talk to people. So that's an outbound lead. And then traditional marketing is really what I'm saying there. So things like adverts or leaflets, you know, a physical element, things that have been around for a while in terms of traditional marketing. But if you look at that blend, your pipeline is reliant on your sources as well. So you need to understand, are you got inbound leads? Are you using digital, outbound, traditional? What are you using? And I'm always saying you should be using a number of different sources for your leads. You can't just rely on one. So you can't just go to networking and rely on that as a form of leads. You should be using that as part of it, but you should also then be looking at, have you got a decent website? Even if you're not using PPC, have you got a website? What are your call to actions on your website? How are you driving people there? And also as well, in terms of that, in terms of traditional, are you advertising? And I'll give Jonathan a blatant plug here. Are you advertising in the Talk Business magazine? Could be an area of you to look at as well. But you need to understand where your sources of leads are coming from, because that really is the start of your water. So if you think about it as a spring, so the spring is being fed obviously from the sky. So in terms of everything that's falling from the sky into the rocks and then is pushed out at a spring level, what is your spring? What's in your spring? What's coming out of it? Where are you using those sources? And it's really key that you can understand that at the beginning, otherwise you can't even put a pipeline together from that. But what I want to look at now is, it's called treatment. So this is a bit of the water treatment. And this is where you've got the water flowing in and you're going to say, okay, so let's look at, a suspect lead or a prospect lead. And I love using this little analogy of 5 bums on a rugby post. And it's a really good way to remember things. And you'll see along the bottom, I've used the words. So you've got how, who, where, which, what, and when. So classic questioning techniques. But these are questions about, is the lead, is the person, are they a suspect or a prospect? So I'm now going to fill in the how, who, where, etc. I'm going to now tell you a little bit more, but it's a really good way to remember some questioning skills about a lead coming in, because lots of people with leads, they go, oh, this is great, I've got a lead, and they put a name somewhere, but actually, are they a suspect? Are they a prospect? Or are you just growing a database? And that's one of the key things. So what I'd really like you to do is we'll go through this together. But after this session is to go back and look at your lists, and we'll talk about lists in a moment, but just think about anyone you've got on your list. Are they a suspect or a prospect? And I'm going to actually say in a minute what that means. But go through any list of names or emails or people you've got on a list. You go, oh, I think they're going to like what I do. Is actually go through this process now in the treatment works of actually whittling people out and going, are they a suspect? Are they a prospect? Or actually, are they of no use at all? So let's look at the H. Let's look at the how. So number one in terms of the treatment is, how did you find them? So where did they come from? So how did you find them? Did they come through networking? Did they come through your website? Did they come through a referral? And you need to write that down. So if you're looking at a list of people that you think, oh, I think they're going to want my product or my services, how did you find them? Because that's important, because that's a really good thing in terms of prospecting. How did you find them? If they came through a referral, well, that's a fantastic way to look at a prospect. The second one is, who are they? And it's not just their name, because you're likely to have that, but who are they in terms of their position in a business? Are they the owner? Are they the decision maker? So if they were to buy your product, do they actually sign the checks? Are they the ones who go, yes, I want to do it? So who are they? So what is their, who are they, their position in the company? If you know the how and you know who they are, then that also helps them to stay as a prospect. If they're not a decision maker, should they be on your list, or are they a suspect? If they're part of a decision-making process, then they probably stay as a prospect. The bigger the company, the likelihood is you'll have more than one decision maker. Okay, you'll have more than one decision maker. So again, the who they are is important. Next one, where are they based? That might sound an obvious one, but where are they based? So if your company is serving a local area, and let's say you're in the Warwickshire, Worcestershire, Gloucestershire areas, and you only service that area and they're based in Manchester, then why are they on your list? Unless they've got a local area, obviously, but why are they on your list? So the where is really important as well, because that helps you to move them to either a suspect or completely take them off the list, or they're a prospect. So if they're in your area, then yes, they should be there. What I hope you'll notice is you need to be ticking most of the boxes for them to stay as a prospect. Okay, you do need to be ticking the boxes. The next one, in terms of which, is this is where you, in terms of either suspect or prospect, but normally prospect, you start to make a decision before you speak to them, is you need to think which goods, products or services they're going to be matching for. So some of us will have multi offerings in terms of our products or services. Others will be quite niche. And so again, it's, which products or service are they going to take? Which hat are you going to put on as well? So which goods, products, or services? And again, if you can answer exactly what you think they're going to want, then that moves us on to the next one. And the next one is, what is their need? So what is their need for your goods, products, or services? You'll only find that out by either doing some investigation or actually speaking to them as part of your process. And we'll look at that in a moment as well. But what is their need? What you'll find is, through the different things that we're looking at here, the 6 parts that I'm talking about, is how you found them. You should know that. Who they are in terms of their decision making. Great, I know that. Where are they based? Good, I know that. Each of these are ticks, so they're still staying on my prospect list. Which product or service do I think they need? Good, I know it, they're going to stay on. And then what is their need? Now, this is likely to have come through your sales process. What is the need? And you should be able to answer that. And again, if you can answer that, then they stay as a prospect, because you feel, and from the conversations you've had, they actually know, you know what their need is. So the what is really, really important. And finally, the last one there, the when will they buy? That is a really clear question to ask. If you can have an answer that is positive to all of these 6 steps, they definitely stay as a prospect. On the first 3, if how you found them is fine, but if you look at the who they are they a decision maker, yes or no? If they're a yes, they stay on your prospect list. Where are they based? If they're based in an area you serve, they still stay on the prospect list. So the 5 bums on a rugby post is really important for you to remember. Just to recap, how did you find them? Who are they? Where are they based? Which goods, products or services do you think they want? What is their need? And when are they going to buy? For anybody who is a prospect, you should know the answers to those. You should be able to write them down, because in terms of those, there are certain things that you're going to do that moves to the next stage in what you are doing. So we're working on the assumption as well here that we move to the next slide. And so this is about tracking. Regardless of your business being a physical business, a digital business, it doesn't matter what you do. And even if it's B2C, it still doesn't matter what you do. Tracking is hugely important. I'll give a couple examples at the end of this slide, but tracking in terms of your prospects is really important. So the tracking in terms of what you do, you can actually, I go back way in time, I go back 30 years ago. How I used to track a prospect was I had what was called a Rolodex. So it was a very nice postcard that has a person's name, and you used to keep your notes in there, and you used to ring them up, or you even had their fax number on it, because there was nothing like emails. So yeah, a Rolodex is just basically keeping your details on a piece of paper. Now, we have moved on in those days. Some people still use that kind of system. A number of us will probably use something like Excel just to keep records on. Some of us will use Outlook to put contacts on. Others will actually use CRM. So from my perspective, we use a CRM. We're partners with HubSpot, and that's fantastic. So we use that to record these things. But as I said right at the beginning, sales hasn't changed. So you need to have your prospect list somewhere, and that goes from an inquiry. Then it will probably go for an appointment. Now that could be a telephone appointment or a Zoom appointment at the moment. And we'll go back to the days of actually physically meeting people soon, which probably then leads to a proposal, a follow-up to the proposal, maybe a few amends, and then ultimately the sale or not. But you need to track where people are in the process. So are they at the inquiry level? Are they at the appointment level, proposal, follow-up, amends or sale? And that in terms of your pipeline means you should not have everybody at the inquiry level. People should be somewhere along that tracking process in your pipeline, because ultimately the sale is the water coming out of the tap at the end. So you've got your inquiry, your appointment. Now, what I want to do is probably just give a couple of examples here. In a B2B setting where you're selling either a high ticket product, to say a manufacturer might be selling a machine that's 100,000 or £1 million, it's going to be quite a prescribed process. They're not going to ring you up and one day and go, I've seen your machine online, I'm going to buy it. That just doesn't work, because you need to be able to go through a sales process. So the inquiry, the appointment, there'll be a time lag on some of those, and things that you do at certain stages will be different and they will change. If you're selling a product that's B2C, potentially you're selling through e-commerce, somebody will go onto your site, they might inquire, they might actually look to trial something, they might buy something straight off that's a smaller element. They're still going to be somewhere in that process, so they still might be there. So the inquiry could be somebody landing on your site. The appointment or the proposal probably isn't. They're just looking at the product, and then will they then actually look at, right, I'm going to buy it. There are various things that happen, and I'll talk about that in the next slide in a moment, where you can influence. Now, the difference between B2B and B2C in terms of the pipeline and in terms of the tracking is, if you're selling a product via e-commerce, most of us now are used to the lovely thing of cookies. And we're used to being on a website and we're looking at something and we've clicked on the button, we've gone to a website and oh, that looks quite nice. We don't actually buy it there and then we go and have another surf around the site, and then an hour later we go back to our site, and funnily enough, an ad on the side pops up with what we were looking at. And we're all probably familiar to that. And that's where in the B2C e-commerce one, you can do some remarketing. But in my model here in tracking, that's a follow-up, because they're actually just giving you a little nudge to go, oh, go back to our website to buy it. So the tracking element works, but there's more sophistication in the B2C than there is in the B2B. The B2B is very much follow this process. But in terms of that, again, if I'm telling you to go and look at your prospects, then start to use the tracking and go, where is somebody in this process? All of us go to networking meetings, and there will be people we've met on a call. And maybe we've exchanged a LinkedIn message or an email message, or somebody said, let's have a one-to-one. They'll go somewhere in the tracking. So if somebody said, well, quite like what you do, and you'll go, oh yeah, well, let's have a one-to-one. What do you do as well? And you go, actually, I do know somebody, or actually we've got a need for that. They do then become an inquiry in your prospects, or they might just be a suspect, but they become an inquiry. And then from that, you'll go, okay, well, you spoke about my product, let's have another one-to-one about it. And let's just say we do some marketing and somebody's looking for a website. You go, okay, well, let's get a meeting put together. So they move to the appointment. Then you're still going well, and they're still going, okay, yeah, we do want a website. Okay, so then you go to the proposal stage. So you should be able to look at anybody on a list that you've got and go, where are they in your pipeline? If you can't, then you need to do a fair bit of work to get this in place. But it's the only way that you will keep the tap flowing in terms of your sales, is tracking where a person is on there. What I tend to find with a lot of customers, they've got databases galore, they've got email addresses galore, they've never looked at their Outlook and extracted it and gone, oh, what are these people any worth having? Should I do something with them? But you should do that. Even if you just extract every bit of data you've got, put it on a spreadsheet and go, are they a suspect, are they a prospect, or are they just not worth having? If you go through that, you become really disciplined to the way that you have your system in place. And that's another really important thing in this whole thing, is where are people on your tracking? So where are people on your pipeline? And you'll look at the arrow, if you're at the bottom end, you're cold, at the top end, you're hot. So you need to keep the flow going of people who are cold, that's cold water coming in, going through the tracking, The more inquiries you've got should mean you've got more appointments, more proposals, more follow-ups, more amends, more sales. That's the logic behind what this does. So just going on to the last couple of slides now. So in terms of the key bits, and this is a really interesting stat that I'm going to discuss with you now about follow-ups, that your pipeline can only operate if you feed it at the front end. So you've got lots of water at the source, which I spoke about in the spring, but follow-ups is so important for your pipeline not to stagnate and stop. So when we looked at the previous slide, we had the tracking from inquiry all the way through to sale, and follow-ups was written there. 65% of people in sales, doesn't matter if you're a business owner who happens to do some sales or you're a salesperson, 65% of people only follow up once. So they'll send the proposal, sit back and wait, and then they'll follow up and go, oh, what do you think? So only 65% of people actually follow up once, because people forget. So salespeople forget, or the next big shiny thing comes along, or you're busy and you just forget to follow up. Now that person, the onus, if you're selling to somebody, the onus is not on them coming back to you. The onus is on you following up to close the sale. Okay, and I could talk about the whole sales process, but that's not what this is about. It's about following up. So in your pipeline and the tracking that I showed you, you might follow up once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. The average sale in a B2B mid to large product is about 5 follow-ups, is about the standard. So if you follow up 4 times and they're nearly there with the decision, or you still haven't got hold of them, the likelihood is the 5th time actually you'll get hold of them, or actually they're going to say yes. In my experience, like, you know, I've followed up some big sales maybe 8 times to get the sale. The key there is, and again, because only 65% of people follow up once, is if you're following up twice, 3 times, 4 times, going through that process, your competitors soon drop off because they just can't be bothered to follow up because they think, oh, they're not interested. It isn't about that. Unless somebody says, look, I'm not interested, go away, I'm not going to buy your product. Okay, fair enough. But most people, and we see it all today, the follow-ups, the way you can follow up now has changed massively. So you can follow up through email, phone calls, WhatsApp. There's so many different ways to follow up. So there's no excuse not to follow up. The other key about follow-ups is having a really clear process of what you do in those follow-ups. So do you follow up after a week, after 2 weeks? Then what do you do? And we as a company, but just it doesn't matter if it was us or anybody else, you should always have sort of 3 clear ways in your process to follow up. Follow up on the phone normally first off, then on email, and then you can use different ways of touching with people, even using LinkedIn and liking a post, just keeping yourself in their mindset. But have a really clear process when you're following up. In particular, you can use digital as well for that. So you could look at your email marketing. So if you're discussing to a prospect, stay in touch with them. You might have a different newsletter that you send to them, a different offer, a different information about your product, which is key to them. But if you do nothing else in sales and you've got someone interested, follow-ups is the number 1. But that's also where your pipeline will stagnate. So your pipeline, if you don't follow up, will stall. Everything gets backed up. You give up and you go, well, I'm getting no sales. And if you haven't got a pipeline, you can't even see where the break is. So that blockage is always follow-ups. So if you haven't got enough leads or enough sales coming out the far end, you need to look up at what your follow-up process is. And everybody, even me, we sometimes do get distracted with other things and we forget to follow up. But follow-ups are crucially important to anybody. And that's why I'm saying about having those processes in place. How do you follow up? Can you automate some of it? And you can automate it through various email functions as well, but you just have to follow up.